Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens have Myles Garrett and the Cleveland Browns terrified ahead of their Week 18 matchup. We talk about that and so much more coming up on a game day edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here on Locked On Ravens, making us your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel. Also in audio form, where you can follow along and subscribe as well. We're a 5-day-a-week plus more daily Ravens show. We bring you daily Ravens coverage, including going live after every Ravens game, which we will be doing later today after the Ravens and Browns face off in a little Saturday night, or Saturday afternoon, I should say, football action. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Here we are. It is week number 18, and it is so crazy, honestly, that we're going to be done with the regular season after this afternoon's game. I mean, I've said it so many times on this show, but it feels like just yesterday we were watching Isaiah Likely, unfortunately, not get his toe down in the end zone. But we hopefully have a long playoff run ahead for this Baltimore Ravens team. And in order to get there, I think the best step is for them to clinch the AFC North, and they are heavily favored to do so against the Cleveland Browns this afternoon. So on today's show, we'll be talking about Myles Garrett having some comments about Lamar Jackson and the Browns and Garrett being terrified about Lamar. We'll talk about all that in the first part of the show. Then in the second part of the show, we'll talk about how the Ravens match up with Cleveland, although the Browns have so many injuries and so many new guys playing that might be a little hard to identify all of them in typical matchups, but we're going to do our darndest here on Locked On Ravens. And then finally, we'll get into some final predictions of the regular season. And then we'll dive into a little bit of how this all could play out for them moving forward into the postseason, win and lose. We'll talk about both scenarios there. So let's talk about Myles Garrett's comments to the media, which came to light a couple of days ago. It picked up traction yesterday as well. But Garrett was asked about Lamar Jackson, and obviously he and Lamar have so much respect for each other, obviously played against each other now for a really long time, and both kind of relish the opportunity. They know that when they play the other, they're going up against one of the absolute best. So Myles Garrett was asked about Lamar and said, "I don't know anybody who has gotten a real clean wallop on him. I don't know if it'll happen, myself included. We'll see. Someone has to do it." But the big comments that people were going crazy about, Myles Garrett was asked about game planning for Lamar Jackson. And he said, beginning of the season, we were like, no, just try to keep him in the pocket, make him throw as much as possible. And now you're like, there's curse words in here. We're a family-friendly show. But essentially he said, we don't know what to do. He lost that baby weight. Now he's back to being lean and fast. Whether he breaks the pocket or stays in the pocket, you're going to have a rough day. He can do everything. And it's almost like Lamar has foiled all these teams' game plans, or at least what they thought they had in a game plan, where it was never about, oh, Lamar can't throw, keep him in the pocket. I think early in his career, he was getting that treatment from teams, but even then he could still throw. That narrative was bad in the first place and not true in the first place. But I think when teams look at Lamar Jackson, or I guess have looked at Lamar Jackson, it has been pick your poison. Either let him throw the ball and stay in that pocket, or if you let him escape and he either makes a play with his legs or with his arm, that can be even more difficult. So I think that teams just don't want to let him get into that float mode in the pocket or have the option to run or pass. But there was times earlier in his career where Lamar was disrespected by other teams. And the whole notion was, Baker Mayfield on Cleveland was like, keep him in the pocket, make it throw, and it's our game. That was some of the treatment that Lamar was getting. But Lamar, like every quarterback, has evolved his game so much over the course of his career, over the course of his time as a starter. And now, we heard Jim Schwartz. If you remember, he talked about Lamar before the Ravens and Browns matched up the first time. And he was talking about how Lamar is, transformed himself and had those comments that were actually pretty controversial in the first place. And people were saying, well, that's not the game plan that you need to have against Lamar. These comments are out of touch and they're not true and they haven't been true. But he said before that game, he's gone from a run-first quarterback to a pass-first quarterback that can make plays with his feet. He was never a run-first quarterback. I mean, he has that ability to his game, and I think that's one of the common misconceptions about Lamar is that because he can run, he's a run-first quarterback. That has never been true. Lamar has just been improving his game all around, and the whole notion that he couldn't throw or that he was a run-first quarterback, again, I don't understand it because, sure, his rookie season, he came into a Joe Flacco offense. Marty Morningwood was the offensive coordinator. It was a different offense than what would have maximized his talents his rookie season. But then the Ravens did that in his second year, his first full-time year as a starter, and he led the league in passing touchdowns, led the Ravens to an incredible historic season, both on the ground. And then, oh, by the way, he led the league in passing touchdowns with 36 that year. Like, that was never a misconception, or that was a misconception of Lamar. It was never true in the first place. So, look, I mean, Lamar has the respect of his peers throughout the league. Myles Garrett is definitely one of those guys that has the utmost respect and understands the greatness that Lamar brings week in and week out. But if I'm Myles Garrett and I'm the Browns, I am terrified of Lamar, especially this week. I mean, it's Myles Garrett and who else on that defense? Literally, it's Myles Garrett and who else? And I know that he, in the single sack record, that's a possibility, but he wants to win, right? He wants to spoil the Ravens' chances of winning the AFC North, as do the entire Cleveland Browns organization. So it's going to be interesting, but, from Myles' words, again, a lot of respect from Myles to Lamar, and Lamar reciprocates that for sure. I remember Myles had the Halloween decorations out that one year. I don't remember how many years ago that was, but he had the Halloween decorations out, and Lamar was there, and kind of like his quarterback graveyard or whatever it was of guys he sacked. And so that was kind of a funny thing. Some people didn't like that. I remember that caused a lot of controversy back in the day, but, I remember the plays with Myles and Jadeveon Clowney on Cleveland, where Lamar was, I think it was the throw to Andrews he had where he just kind of backpedaled 30 yards or something and tossed the ball up, and Andrews was down there, and Myles shook his hand. Clowney slammed his helmet down. Like, those are the types of fits that Lamar can give defenses. He's been doing it his entire career. I remember the Sam Hubbard play. Remember Isaiah Likely, that incredible touchdown against Cincinnati? Sam Hubbard's just sitting there with his hands on his hips. Like, what the heck did I just see? So with Myles Garrett saying, yeah, now it's like, what do we do? The game plan, teams want to take away the option ability of, Lamar can float out in the pocket. He can throw the ball. He can buy time. He can run if there's a lane. They would rather have him in the pocket throwing the ball. The issue is that Lamar will slice and dice you from the pocket. Like, that is a thing that he does. He has done it all season long. And that is why Lamar Jackson is firmly in the conversation for his third MVP. So Lamar's an incredible player. His peers understand that. His peers realize that. And by the way, I take the peers' word over some of the other people who talk sometimes about Lamar Jackson. Just for the record. I mean, again, everybody's entitled to their opinion. I'm not trying to take that away from anybody, but I would just hope that everything was taken into consideration, including how Lamar's peers feel about him. So some comments from Myles Garrett that certainly had some weight during the course of this week, and now we are here on game day, and I think that Myles Garrett and that defense might have their hands full with Lamar Jackson in the offense today. So coming up in the second part of the show, we'll be talking about how the Ravens match up with Cleveland and why it might not be a good day for that Cleveland organization. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where PrizePicks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, PrizePicks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With PrizePicks, you simply pick more or less on player stats, like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, and whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly. PrizePicks has got you covered, and with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. I've been playing for a while now, and I'm having a blast. This week I'm eyeing Jared Goff for more than 230 passing yards and Derrick Henry for more than 1 touchdown. It's so easy to use, and I love how fast the payouts are. I've gotten paid in as little as 15 minutes when my picks hit, plus the weekly promos like Taco Tuesday discounts add even more value to my lineups. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today. Use code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. We're back, our second segment of Locked On Ravens here on Game Day. Kevin Oestreicher here with you, talking Ravens football. Again, appreciate everybody for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Hit that like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Ravens and Browns face off in Week 18. If the Ravens win, they clinch the AFC North. They will be locked into that 3 seed. They will play either the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Los Angeles Chargers, depending on how these next couple of days go. So a lot of excitement in the air. Again, I'm excited for this playoff run. I think the NFL is pretty wide open. The AFC pretty wide open, and we'll get to that in the final part of the show a little bit more. But let's talk about how this Ravens team matches up with Cleveland. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, it's very weird to analyze and preview this game because Cleveland has so many players out, so many new faces. Their roster is just at this point not very good with everybody that's missing. So we can talk about players like Myles Garrett and Jerry Jeudy and some of these others. Obviously, Bailey Zappi is going to be the one that gets to start for Cleveland today, and I don't think that's going to go very well for him, especially with how this Ravens defense is playing. Let's start with the Ravens side of things. First of all, injury-wise, Jalen Armour-Davis and Justice Hill both are out. And the Ravens also made some roster moves. And the reason Jalen Armour-Davis is out is because he was placed on injured reserve. So tough blow for Jalen Armour-Davis, who really just hasn't been able to stay healthy. But the reason is because they activated Charlie Kolar. So Charlie Kolar activated from injured reserve. I know that he's not as flashy as a Mark Andrews or an Isaiah Likely, but he is a big part of what the Ravens do, particularly in heavy sets and in the ground game. He's a very important player there. So that's a big get for the Ravens just ahead of the playoffs. They also elevated Chris Wormley and Anthony Miller from the practice squad for the game today. So 2 guys who will have an opportunity. And I think that the big thing here for the Ravens is that their health situation, knock on wood, there it is, knock on wood, up to this point has been very, very good. And I think worst case scenario is something happens to a guy in this game and they have to miss couple of weeks. I mean, again, we're not in September anymore where a month injury is like, okay, yeah, sure, they'll come back in October or November. A month injury is you're probably done for the season. And that's really tough. So hopefully they're able to come out of this game unscathed. I think that's the most important thing here. Obviously, winning is the most important thing, but health-wise, if you're able to get the job done, that comes next. But I think for the Ravens, you look at this Cleveland team and it feels not even like great reading out these stats for the Browns because this is not the Browns team. Like everybody's out. David Njoku, Denzel Ward, Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford, Pierre Strong, obviously guys they faced the first time. Zadarius Smith, he's in Detroit. They didn't face Amari Cooper the first time because he was traded to Buffalo before then. So just a lot of new faces for Cleveland. And obviously Jameis Winston not playing. I think that is that's a good thing for Ravens fans who might be a little worried about the trap here. I'll read off the stats just to read them out. I mean, Cleveland is the 24th best pass defense in the league. They're 15th best rush defense in the league. Offensively, they're the worst passing offense in the league, and they are the 23rd best rushing offense. So, I mean, Cleveland is not a good team. They haven't been good all season. They're honestly going for the number 1 pick here. You can't tell the players to tank, but the organization themselves can hold guys out. I mean, obviously, I think that's what's going on with Jameis here. And it's difficult because for a Browns team that feels pretty directionless with the whole Deshaun Watson thing, like, yeah, sure, they could go and take a Travis Hunter if they get the number 1 pick, or maybe they go quarterback like Shadur Sanders, Cam Ward, whatever that would look like. But feels like this division is Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati, and then Cleveland again. It's just kind of at the bottom there. So the Ravens, they need to win this game. They need to win it by a lot because I think what we've seen, and if you want to even talk about like conversion offense for Cleveland, Cleveland's defense is actually very good conversion-wise on third down. They're the third best conversion defense on third down, giving up just 35.2% on third down. Offensively, they're the worst, so I guess it balances out a little bit, converting just 29.3% of their looks on third down on offense. So obviously with the talent they've lost, I would expect Baltimore's defense to do a good job against that Browns offense there. But the Ravens defense hasn't been particularly great on third down, right? It hasn't been that great. They're 20th in the league in third down percentage on defense. Offensively, they're third. They're the best red zone offense in the league. Look, Myles Garrett's a handful, and the Ravens will have their hands full with some of these Browns talented defenders, but a lot of the guys that make that unit go besides Myles Garrett, who work in tandem with Myles Garrett, they're not going to be there. And I think when it comes to momentum for the playoffs, winning 4 straight would be huge. It's not the be-all, end-all. I've mentioned it before. The 2012 team, they ended up losing 3 of the final 4 before making it to the postseason. They went on a run. They won the Super Bowl. But definitely doesn't hurt to feel good about yourself heading into the postseason and what will very likely be a tough path that, again, I believe is an open one, but still a very tough one. So if you let Bailey Zappi come into your house and beat you, I really wouldn't have any words for that. It's my job to say words on Locked On Ravens, and I might just come on the live after the game and sit in silence for 35 minutes and just watch the chat go. Like, that's how shocked, flabbergasted, floored I would be if the Ravens dropped this game. And, it's always tough because the Ravens, some of their MO in a bad way has been they will play down to teams. They will not wake up for games they need to wake up for, and they overlook teams. That's been some of the book on Baltimore. But, man, this Browns team just has nobody. They don't. It's Myles Garrett, Jerry Jeudy, and that's it. Like, Jerry Jeudy's had a great resurgence. But, even the players that beat up on Baltimore the first time around, like a Cedric Tillman, he's been out with a concussion. I think maybe it was the next week or the week after that happened. He's on IR. He hasn't played ever since that. So the Browns, a lot would have to go their way. I'm not saying it's impossible, but, man, it would be an upset win for Cleveland for the ages. So coming up, we'll talk about some final predictions for this game, as well as looking ahead to the playoffs. We'll talk about winning scenarios and losing scenarios. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to get to here on Locked On Ravens Game Day Style. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance to $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We are back, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on the Saturday game day edition of the show. Appreciate everybody for being here, whether you are making your way down to the stadium, listening to the pregame here, if you're on your way to a friend's house, a family member's house, getting ready, if you're setting up in your own home, waiting for the game to start, or if you're just listening on a drive or just watching regularly. Really appreciate all of the support here on the show, both in audio form and in video form. Started this thing up in August of 2019. I became the host of this show and have been going strong ever since. We started up video form a couple years after we did audio form, and all the communities we've built here on Locked On Ravens, video form, where we've hit over 10,000 subscribers, audio form, which continues to grow every day, social media, everything, subtext. It's been an incredible journey here on Locked On Ravens. I cannot wait for it to continue, and hopefully it continues for the Ravens into the postseason on a deep postseason run. So we're going to be back here again later today on Locked On Ravens after the Ravens and Browns face off. We'll be breaking down everything live, so be sure about 15 minutes after the game or so, we'll be breaking it down. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button in video form for the live, and then obviously it'll be available in playback and audio and video as well. Let's get into some final predictions for this game. My first one is the Ravens are going to clean house here and just dominate the Cleveland Browns. The Ravens, they have been a part of some of the biggest spreads with our friends at FanDuel, some of the biggest spreads I've ever seen. And it's incredible because this game is, I guess, fluctuated a little bit, especially with all of the news of, okay, who's it going to be? Is it DTR? This is a 19.5-point spread over on FanDuel. The Ravens 19.5-point favorites. And I don't really think that's that far-fetched. Like, I feel like that could happen. I mean, again, remember the last time Ravens and Giants on FanDuel, the Ravens massive spread, they dominated that. They covered that. Like, I feel like this could be the same way. AFC North games can always get weird. I get that. It'd be a pretty big disappointment if the Ravens didn't win this by more than 14 points. Like, I think 14 points is the cushion here, and that's expectations for this team. This is almost a tune-up game. It almost feels like on the Browns side, it's an exhibition game because you have so many young players and guys that, you know, haven't probably seen a field for a long time in the league to go out there and try to beat a team that is trying to win the division. This is a hat and t-shirt game. There is stuff on the line for the Ravens in this game. And so with that added factor, if this was kind of like the Ravens were locked into their 3 seed and they're not playing anybody, yeah, of course we'd have different projections and predictions for this game. But I think one of my big predictions is Lamar Jackson does wrap up the MVP here. I've said it's over for a while. Obviously, that was more so with Dan Orlovsky saying it was over for Josh. I'm like, hey, if we're saying it's over for Josh, now I can say it's over for Lamar, right? Obviously, you want to play the full 18 games or 17 games, 18 weeks. But I do think this game has swing factor. Like, if Lamar puts up a dud, the MVP probably goes to Josh Allen. If Lamar, puts up Jackson 5, beats the single season passer rating record, balls out, big moments, I think people sway towards Lamar. So it's a close MVP race. I know we've talked a lot about it. It feels kind of weird to be talking about it this late in the show because usually we talk about it a lot earlier than this, but it's one of the more polarizing things throughout the league right now. So of course you got to talk about it when it's the biggest headline, but I just feel like Lamar is going to be able to feast on this Browns defense. And I think the most ideal thing is maybe Lamar doesn't play in the fourth quarter, right? I think the game being out of reach to the point where you can rest your guys in the fourth quarter, get ready for the wild card round. That's probably the best thing, the best case scenario that can happen here is you're able to get your guys more rest and obviously not risk the injury. So I don't know what it's going to be like. Maybe it'll be a slow start, or maybe Todd Monken will come out with a beautiful, perfect drive, and we won't have to talk about a slow start, hopefully. But I think Lamar will ball out here. Derrick Henry, I think, will have a pretty big field day as well. Rashod Bateman, I think, maybe will get revenge for the ball that bounced off of his face. Remember, because last time these two teams played, it was an ugly game. Another prediction based off of that first game is that the Ravens have 3 interceptions in this game. And if you remember the first game the Ravens played against Cleveland, bunch of dropped interceptions was one of the main reasons they lost that game. Now, there's no Eddie Jackson this time around, and that Eddie Jackson performance was one of the worst games I've ever seen from any Raven in franchise history, not even an exaggeration. He was awful all game, terrible. He's no longer on the team. The Ravens might actually see him next week if they play the Chargers in the playoffs. So this is a game that you have to win. It's a game you have to make a statement in. If you don't, I think a lot of people will find it disappointing. But it's week 18, final week of the season. Teams are looking ahead to the playoffs. I'm sure Baltimore even is looking ahead a little bit, but you can't look far ahead when you still have the division to clinch. So let's talk about if the Ravens win the division. Talked about it before, but there are essentially 4 different scenarios that the Ravens could be in here. If the Ravens beat the Browns and the Steelers win, the Ravens will be guaranteed to face the Chargers. That is how it goes. There is no scenario where the Steelers win and they don't get the 5 seed. The Chargers will be locked into the 6 seed if that happens. If the Steelers lose, then there is a possibility that it could be the Steelers coming to Baltimore, because if the Steelers lose and the Chargers win, the Chargers will flip-flop with Pittsburgh. Chargers will become the 5 seed. Steelers will become the 6 seed. But again, we will know by the end of the night tonight if there is a shot that the Chargers could leapfrog the Steelers or not. If the Steelers pull out a win, then it's the Chargers coming to Baltimore, assuming the Ravens win. If the Ravens win and the Steelers lose, then we would have to wait until tomorrow to find out if it's the Steelers or Chargers coming to Baltimore. There is a scenario where the Steelers lose, the Chargers don't come to Baltimore, or do come to Baltimore. That would be if the Steelers lose and the Chargers lose. That would mean the Chargers come to Baltimore. So a lot of crazy playoff scenarios. The other one, and this one is pretty straightforward. If the Ravens lose and the Steelers win, that means the Steelers win the AFC North and the Ravens would be the 5 seed because they have the head-to-head over the Chargers. So they'd be locked into the 5 seed. They would be traveling to Houston to play the Texans. I think the Ravens would absolutely destroy the Texans in the playoffs, much like we saw against them on Christmas. Like, I feel like that's a great matchup for the Ravens. That's the matchup I prefer, and I've been preferring that for the past 2 months now. If you've been listening to me every day on this show, you know that. But out of the two between Pittsburgh and Los Angeles, I'd still probably want to face the Chargers because playing a team 3 times, even though Pittsburgh is imploding right now, there's a ton of off-field and on-field drama. Russell Wilson is not nearly as good as Justin Herbert. I just feel like the way that those games get can be really, really weird. And in the playoffs, it gets 10 times weirder. So all that would be an interesting dynamic heading into a Ravens-Steelers game on Wild Card Weekend in Baltimore again. But even with the Chargers, it just feels like they don't have the guys defensively to keep up with the Ravens, whereas the Steelers, I think that they have a better shot to. And especially when the Ravens have struggled with some defensive fronts that have been more physical this season, you can look at that as well. It all just kind of makes up for a weird game. So I still think the Ravens win both matchups, by the way. I'm not saying, the Ravens are going to lose to Pittsburgh. Like I would still feel confident in both. But we're going to see because there are storylines for both. It's obviously if the Chargers come to town, it's the Harbaugh again, J.K. Dobbins again, Greg Roman, the L.A. Chargers or L.A. Ravens. And then if the Steelers come, it's obviously Ravens-Steelers matchup, divisional, all that type of deal. So I'm antsy. I'm antsy for the playoffs to start. I'm really excited for it. A lot of hope here in Baltimore, especially with the way they've looked over these last 3 weeks, and hopefully it can be 4. So, man, I'm predicting the Ravens blowout today. I'm going to say 31-14 is the final score for me. Maybe 17 if Cleveland gets a little lucky. I don't feel like Cleveland is going to have anywhere near the firepower to stop this Ravens team. And I think being at home, hat and t-shirt game, I think the Ravens get their hat and t-shirts and they look forward to hosting a home playoff game in Baltimore, which will be really, really exciting. So that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into this game day edition, last regular season game day edition of the show for 2024-2025. Later today, we'll be back here again on Locked On Ravens. We'll be breaking down the game live, so be sure to tune in for that. Hit the like and subscribe button in video form, turn notifications on, and also in audio form, subscribe, notification bell, everything, same show, both audio and video. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back here later today on Locked On Ravens.